Hey everyone, we're back with another edition of 90s Night. I'm your host Benner, and of course, to my left, I always get this mixed up. I'm joined with my co-host, of course, for 90s Night, Kells McNells. Kells, how you doing? Welcome back.
I'm great.
Thanks for coming back. I know we always
Thank
talk about that. It's always we jokingly talk about how it's always tough to get you back, on these shows, but that's a lie. That's a joke because I know you like doing them. And I gotta say, nice hat tonight, nice lid.
thank you. Thank you
Um,
very much.
uh,
It's a wonderful shade of purple. It's available on our website and it's super fashion. So it's tucked over my headphones, as you can tell, which is stretching me out a little bit. But, that's just what we do for fashion here.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never seen somebody wear a toque over top of headphones before, but I guess that's a new style. What do I know, man? People are
Yeah.
wearing socks of sandals, they're wearing Crocs out there. I don't know what's going
Yeah.
on.
I'm a
So,
I'm a fashions trendsetter, Benner. If there's anything you should know about me, it's this.
yeah. Now, listen. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I really appreciate everyone coming back to the program, and of course, we are doing. This is a little bit of a special episode because we are doing this, recording this as part of the Scare-a-thon, which is taking place on all kinds of radio stations, internet radio stations, with the help of Casey Ferguson, our friend, and friend of the program from the Casey Ferguson Show, of course. And he's running a whole host of different horror content, scary content, Halloween content as part of the Scare-a-thon. And he called us up and he was like, "Hey, man, it was so cool that you guys did Halloween in May. Would you guys want to do a couple of other episodes?" So we decided, listen, let's do one on Alien 3, which is one of the awesome movies that we have reviewed before because we actually were up in Sudbury as part of Sick, which was great. Big thanks to those guys for having us up there and for hosting us. And of course, we did a live version of that. And we decided to, hey, why don't we actually do a recording in our studios about Alien 3? And we'll see if we have any other additional thoughts to kind of add into it, because we actually talked about the film post recording when we were up in Sudbury. And so I feel like I don't know, you never know, but let's see what can come out. Of course, tonight I am Mr. Clemens. We'll get into why that's kind of relevant or important soon. And of course, Kells, who are you tonight?
Tonight I am a canine xenomorph because the bitch is back. I don't know. Because of reasons.
Are you just saying that because you didn't have enough time to change your name to the
No,
bitch?
I'm saying that because like canine and feline, not feline, female dog is a bitch and a canine xenomorph. You
Right.
know what, Benner? I'm doing a thing. I'm doing a
Spoken
canine
spoken 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 like a true
thing.
person from the 1990s, right?
Yes,
I wasn't
exactly.
swearing, and of course we're not swearing because this
No.
has to go on FM radio. So we're gonna be good tonight, and this is gonna be a cussin free episode of 90s Night. And
Though I do have to say so many of the taglines contain that word, so I don't really know what
no,
to
but I
do
think
with
that's
that.
okay. That's okay. Like, this is
Because that's a
2024.
tagline. This
Yeah,
is it's we're
I just think
allowed.
we
We're
can't do
allowed.
any F bombs.
No, gosh,
Um,
no.
so
Gosh
so we're
golly,
but hey,
no.
listen, we're gonna be good. We're gonna be good tonight. And of course, we are broadcasting hopefully around the world. If you like our stuff, check us out. We're on YouTube or any of the social media platforms at Black Fawn Distro. And of course, we post these as part of our 90s Night series, which is available on our Black Fawn Distro YouTube channel. So check us out there as well. And
Mhm.
without further ado, we've got 1 hour, so we got to keep this tight. And it was great last time because when we did these episodes last time for Casey as part of Halloween in May, we were actually right on the money. So look, we're a few
I
minutes
believe in
in.
us.
You believe?
I
Yeah.
believe we can do it. We
And if
can do
not,
it
we'll
in an
fix it in
hour.
editing.
We'll do it
No.
live.
We actually do these things live. We actually do record them live. We don't necessarily cut them up ever.
Yeah.
We do an hour straight, just
Yeah.
like the real radio, right?
Yeah.
So you let
Exactly.
us know
And
how we're
also
doing.
there may be a dog barking in the background if I can't get on the mute button fast enough, so we'll see about that.
And that's fine. That's all part of the production because you got to remember that a lot of people are listening to us. They're not
Mhm.
watching us. So
That's true.
one, they're going to hear the dog in the background maybe, and they're going to go, "That's a nice tie-in to Alien 3."
To the canine xenomorph.
Yeah, and then also an additional benefit for you, Kels, is that no one actually got to see you wear that toque over your headphones.
That's very true. We're missing out on that massive fashion moment.
All right. Anyway, listen, we're gonna go. We're gonna jump right in now. Of course, it's '90s night, so that means you always, Kells, come up with a drink. You're a resident mixologist, of course. Came with all kinds of drinks at Sick, which is awesome. Which was awesome, but we didn't have a chance to do one live there. So you came up with something. What are you drinking over there?
Yeah, so today I have what I like to call the stupid crummy space jail, inspired by Alien 3 or Alien Cubed, as I like to call it. It is a nihilistic dose of black vodka topped with iced tea and an ironic splash of lemonade, and it's actually quite tasty. It's essentially an Arnold Palmer with black vodka, but you know what?
Well,
It tastes
don't say
good.
it like that. Yeah. See,
It's
like
essentially a really fancy drink that in no way resembles any other drink you've ever heard of or seen before.
it does look depressingly drab though in color. There's
Right?
not a lot of
It
color.
This really kind of made me feel like it made me think of like the whole oil slick, really gross space jail type of thing. So that's what we're going for with this. We're going the stupid crummy space jail. So
And
that's
listen,
where we're at.
spoiler alert: if you'd actually watched the assembly cut of the film, you would have tied that into the oceans on the planet in
Yes,
Alien 3. But
it's
you
true.
know, hey, I'm assuming you haven't watched the assembly cut since we last reviewed the movie.
No, I haven't because I didn't think I would need to.
One and done. Yeah. All right, here we go. All right, we're jumping into it now. Okay, synopsis.
Synopsis.
Now, listen,
Yes.
I don't have a synopsis for this film because I have the box set of Alien
Mm.
3. But here we go. It's we actually pulled this, I believe, from IMDb, which we don't usually do, but here it is. Returning from LV 426, Ellen Ripley crash lands on the maximum security prison Fiorina 161, where she discovers that she's unwittingly brought along an unwelcome visitor. Uh,
Mm.
hey, I nailed that name of that planet.
You did. I'm so
I
proud of
always want
you.
to say Furiosa, and I always want to say Furion from the Pitch Black series. But yeah, hey, look, whatever, man. There you go.
Well,
Scarathon nailed it.
mm.
Okay, what do you got down for just give us a quick rundown of the production and initial release.
For sure. Well, funny you should mention Pitch Black. We'll get into that later. But this was released by 20th Century Fox. Theatrically was released on May 22nd, 1992, and production of the film occurred starting January 14th, 1991. Now, if you are doing math in your head, that is a long production time from January 1991 to May 1992. There's a lot, obviously, that went on with this one. Directed by David Fincher, who did this following a buttload of music videos that he had done that was very, very sort of this was a departure for him, creating something or directing something this massive in scale. It was written. Here's where it gets complicated. Written by Vincent Ward, who wrote the story, David Giler and Walter Hill, who wrote The Warriors, Larry Ferguson, who also wrote The Hunt for Red October, Beverly Hills Cop 2, and Highlander, which is an interesting mix of movies. But altogether, they kind of contributed to the script. And again, teasing, as we'll get into, so did many other people.
Yeah, and I think that obviously the movie starring the iconic Sigourney Weaver, of course, with great supporting cast, which I think is understated, and we'll get into that throughout the show. But Charles S. Dutton, Charles Dance, Paul McGann, and Brian Glover, and of course, a lot of who's who of character actors kind of in this film, I think, and working actors, and that's really great to see. And of course, this was Sigourney Weaver's third time back in the role, so it was a big event. And yes, you're absolutely right. That's an excruciatingly long production time. And of course, this was the production from hell. It wasn't necessarily anything that anyone expected. They really thought that this movie was going to be a massive hit, and it is. Yeah, it's we'll get into it. But anyway, let's give a rundown of the box office. Of course, domestic box office gross was $55.5 million. International box office is 104.3, which is a total for $159.8 million, which you would think would be a great success in a movie like this, but budget was $50 million. Of course, all numbers estimates in American or USD, and but it wasn't. It was considered a failure just based on the success of the first two films. Of course, both. I would say 5 out of 5 films, Alien and its sequel, Aliens. Runtime here of 1 hour and 54 minutes. Of course, we always make a note of the runtime on 90s films, coming in under that 2 hour mark. And of
So
course that,
close.
yeah, and that has something to do with the assembly cut as well, which we'll touch on later on. Currently 44% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's rotten on Rotten Tomatoes. 126 reviews. Critical consensus being Alien 3, or Alien Cubed, as you like to call it, Kells.
I do.
Admirable risks with franchise mythology, but far too few pay off in a thinly scripted sequel whose stylish visuals aren't enough to enliven a lack of genuine thrills. Ugh. So
Ugh,
now, uh,
so bleak.
so bleak, just like the setting of this film. But we're gonna get into it. We're gonna get into it because this is a divisive movie, and it's been dividing fans for a long, long time. But Kels, before we get there, what do you have for the marketing for the film when it first came out?
Yes, so the initial marketing for the film, there was quite a few taglines associated with this one. So first off, in 1979, it came from within. In 1986, it was gone forever. In 1992, our worst fears have come true. It's back. Very ominous.
Yeah.
More direct and to the point with this one. The bitch is back, as
Mm.
previously mentioned. Um, Next, we have start running. Dot 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 again. The bitch is back. They're really leaning on that one. This time it's hiding in the most terrifying place of all. Ambiguous. Our worst fears have come true. It's back. Again, very direct. And my personal favorite, 3 times the suspense, 3 times the danger, 3 times the terror. So
Yeah.
that's really it.
Right. And I love the bitch is back just because it's well, one, great Elton John song,
Yes,
right? And but
absolutely.
also a great callback to Aliens, which I
Yes.
think as part of the marketing, I think is a really great idea. And again, I mean, but I don't know. I think the marketing team kind of did a pretty good job of this. I love I love the posters and stuff that we did. And I'm just gonna throw up our sort of our trailer card here, but I love the alien thing that's in there, the image, and I just loved all the marketing that came out for this film. I remember it when they hung the posters in the theater and that sort of thing. It was a
Hmm.
big deal when this movie was coming out, because obviously Sigourney Weaver wasn't supposed to reprise her role, but then did so anyway. So as far as the formats go, I watched this on Blu-ray. Funny story about this. So I watched it as it's not called the Alien Quadrilogy. It's called something else on Blu-ray. It's
Mm.
the first 4 films before they released all the other ones,
It's the
and
box set.
we'll get to that in a second as well.
Mhm.
But it was I couldn't get it to play on my PS5. It won't play the Alien 3 disc, and I was like, what the hell? And I looked it up online, and yeah, it just doesn't play the Alien 3 disc for some reason. So even after 3 decades of production hell, yeah, the movie still troubled, I guess. But I did get to watch it on another Blu-ray player, and yeah. So it's, do you remember watching this movie? I don't. Have you never seen this movie, or what's the deal with this? Because I know we had
Well,
discussed it and we were like, why don't we do Alien 3? It's 90s, made 92.
yes. So this film, I don't remember, as per usual. I don't remember the first time I saw it. However, I do remember I was not allowed to watch this movie. So I grew up in a Sigourney Weaver alien household. I was raised on Aliens primarily, but also Alien, a healthy dose of that. But primarily Aliens was like my go-to as a child. I adored that movie. And I can't remember when I first saw this, but it was after I saw Alien Resurrection, because I think my parents' whole thing was like they knew how much Ripley was amazing, and like they loved that I love Ripley. That who doesn't love Ripley? So when I saw the Alien films, I saw Aliens first to introduce me to Ripley as a badass character, so that I wouldn't be scared of what happens to her when I watch Alien the first, knowing that she would
Right.
get out of it okay. I was not allowed to watch Alien 3 because she, spoilers, dies in it, and they're like, that's going to be upsetting. However, I was allowed to watch Alien Resurrection because she's back in that one. So I
Again.
think eventually I was maybe allowed to watch Alien 3 because they're like, now she's back in Resurrection, so we can translate this over and you're not going to be, I don't know. It was a lot of jumping around in the timeline of the Alien films for me, but I definitely saw this at some point in my life well after every other Alien film at that time.
Okay. Like I remember having this movie on VHS, and there was a trilogy box set put out. And I remember I loved
Mhm.
the Alien movies so much, and I actually always kind of like this movie too. Like it was the third worst movie, right? Like
Yeah.
it always was, right? It was the worst movie out of the trilogy, and so I had this box set, but I remember they put out the box set, and it was widescreen on VHS, and I had bought that because I got
Mm.
the full picture. It's like kind of when I was sort of
I can
digging
see
into
everything.
films. You see everything, nothing gets cut off. Um, and I had that for a while, and I watched those movies religiously. So I kind of always had a little bit of a soft spot for this film anyway. But my like, what are your initial thoughts on this film? Because I've got some feelings on this, and I think they're I don't know how popular they're going to be, but did you want to go first? Did you want to tackle this first, or how you want to do this?
Sure.
'Cause there's
So
a lot to
I'll
talk about.
There's a lot to talk about. I mean, I don't know if we want to get into like the production of this movie first and like all the chaos that kind of unfolded to make this movie what it is.
Sure.
So to
Yeah.
kind of get a little bit of a backstory, originally the story was Corporal Hicks was supposed to take over of the hero as the hero of the story. The initial draft of the script was written by cyberpunk author William Gibson, who kind of like mockingly summed up his script as space commies hijack alien eggs, big problem in wall world, which
Perfect.
kind of tells you very vaguely, but also very specifically what that film was about. So Sigourney Weaver had been unhappy with the studio shortening the runtime of Aliens in 1986 because there was a whole kind of subplot that was about her character and her daughter that was essentially cut out of that film. It was brought back in the director's cut, which I saw on the box set, which I have because it's excellent. Um, but she kind of like compared the making of an alien movie with childbirth and like how it was such an important thing to her. So she had initially agreed to like a small cameo only because they didn't want Ripley to become like a burden to the story because there's only so many aspects of that character you can do. But she was eventually persuaded into a starring role when the studio decided that Ripley was kind of central to the series. They're like, you can't do Alien or Aliens or Alien Cubed without Ripley. She is as much of this movie as the xenomorph is, and I stick with that as well. I do believe that that is a very important part of the Alien lexicon is the
Mhm.
character of Ripley. Uh, as mentioned, it went through several different writing stages. So I think there was one written by cyberpunk author William Gibson, as mentioned. There was one written by Eric Red, who wrote Near Dark and The Hitcher. There was one written by David Toohey, who went on to use many of his own ideas to create Pitch Black, which he mentioned earlier with the name
Mhm.
of the planet. So tie in there. It was then taken over by then director Vincent Ward, who brought on John Pisano to write his own version of the script. But then when David Toohey found out that Pisano was writing concurrently with his own script, he left the project. And then Vincent Ward refused to make changes imposed by Fox, so he was fired. And then Walter Hill and David Guiley were brought in to fix the script. But then Fox approached David Fincher to direct, but then he had his own script work that he wanted to do with author Rex Pickett. And like it was this whole big messy mess of messiness.
Yeah,
Um,
as soon as you got like we always say this too when we're reviewing these movies, like especially and we always make this as a criticism as of today, is that as soon
mhm.
as you have three or four, like three writers is usually fine because it's usually like a couple people writing the thing and then someone coming in to polish it up. But as soon as you got four names on there, you're like,
Oh,
ah,
buddy.
I don't know. Someone's in there tinkering around with stuff they probably shouldn't be or trying to fix something that's
Yeah.
unfixable, right?
It's like if you
Um,
see a movie with like 20 producers, you're like, "Ooh, something's gonna be weird with this one
yeah,
here."
someone ran out of money.
Yeah, and then
So that's
someone else
okay.
decided that they wanted to have a say in what was happening, and I'm sure
Yeah.
all of them had very different ideas of what they wanted to happen. So, my whole thing with Alien 3 or Alien Cubed, as I like to call it, because mathematically that's what it looks like, is
Relentless
it
on that.
just I know,
Relentless
I
on the
can't
Alien
help
Cube.
it. I just it's again, it's what my brain decides is right. But I think that this film is such a strange introduction into the alien area of story because like on the one hand, I know we've kind of discussed this casually on the side. I think it is a really interesting and important direction to take the character of Ripley because I don't know where else her character can go except for having like this really big cathartic moment at the end. This moment of self-sacrifice. However, I do feel that as a alien film, and To be fair, Alien and Aliens very different tonally. They're not on the same page tonally, but Alien 3 is not even in the same book tonally. Like it's completely all over the place. It's a very very different feel to the film. It's a very very different feel to the franchise, and I think the one of the things about the Alien franchise or the Alien trilogy when you look at these first three films is it kind of in a way, just in terms of the tonal diversity, reminds me a little bit of the Evil Dead franchise, where you
Mm.
have the first film, which is like very serious and like very scary and like takes itself in a really serious direction. You have the second film where they're like getting a little bit wacky with it, they're going over the top. And then they have the third film, and you're like, what is happening? How did he get to medieval England? What is going on here? What is this space crummy planet? Like it just feels completely off the rails in a very curious way, not necessarily a bad way, but it just feels very very different to me. So I think I always kind of struggled with Alien 3, and I honestly I kind of forget that it exists a lot of the time. I kind of just gloss right over it in my mind and just go straight to like Alien Resurrection when I think about the Alien franchise. Or now I will think of Alien Romulus when I think of the Alien franchise and gloss over this period of time. But yeah, it's just there's so much that went on behind the scenes to make this project just total chaos, and it kind of comes across as just total chaos.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, the rumor was that David Fincher showed up and there was a 63-page script, which is
Yeah.
essentially half a script for a feature.
Hmm.
I mean, I just think this movie is so interesting, as for multiple reasons. And one is that it's Fincher's first movie. He's disavowed it. You know, as far as he's concerned, Seven is his first
Hmm.
feature film. And I understand that. I understand why, and of course why you wouldn't want to revisit this. I really hope that one day he does, and you know, we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later on. But for the most part, like you do see shades of his greatness as a director, and tonally, you're right. Like it doesn't fit with, let's say, Alien One or Aliens, but I think tonally it fits with Fincher's aesthetic for the
Oh,
most
totally.
part. And you know, of course, we're mostly focusing on the direct, or sort of the theatrical cut of the film, but there is an
Hmm.
assembly cut. There won't be a director's cut
Hmm.
until David Fincher comes back to the project. So the assembly cut is about an extra 20 minutes long, or 25 minutes long, I think, or 30, no, 30 minutes. I can't remember. I think it's like 26 minutes long, or something like that. It's way better. It fills in all those gaps. It fills in it shades things up. It's still a dour movie, but I kind of like that. Like I feel like when you talk about, you know, where else would you take Ripley's character? The one thing I really like about this film is that I think the premise of the film is fantastic as far as landing on a planet. Take Hicks and Newt out of this. Okay.
Hmm.
Like I think the movie would be stronger if they were in it, and I really don't know why they weren't. I've never been able to figure that out, but remove that aside, that aside, because that's obviously, I think that's the thing that brings the film down. But if you don't care about that, the premise of the film is pretty fantastic. They land on a planet, or the crash land on a planet. There's an alien on board. You don't know where it is, and also as well, like it's the prison is all these kind of prisoners at the end or the outer rim of space, just left to kind of die off. And Ripley has this sort of like unflinching, like she's unflinching in her quest to sort of eradicate the xenomorph. And I really feel like there's a couple things that they do in this film that I think are really really clever. One, I do feel that they kind of expand Ripley's character a little bit in this film, which I think
Hmm.
is tough to do in a third installment. And at the time, this was going to be the final installment, of course. But you know, I just feel like, there's she she has this, she it's like she has a purpose in this film, and that purpose is to save humanity. And
Right.
I think that's big stakes in a small contained sort of like almost like a haunted house movie, if to be honest. And I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of good things that are going on in this movie. I just wish that they had time to let them breathe. And the assembly cut should have probably been the film to being released, because it is infinitely stronger.
Yeah. I mean, having not seen it, I can't speak on that with confidence.
Like, and it's not
However,
sorry, and I should sorry, but don't mean to cut you off. I'm not gonna say it's like a completely different movie.
no,
It's
no, but
just
it's
more
it's
nuanced,
improved. Yeah,
and
yeah.
there's 2 major things, plot points in it that are erased from the theatrical cut that really sort of play into, they just make this film stronger. But yeah, anyway, sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, so for me, again, having Ripley be like such a strong and impactful character to me as a youth, part of the thing, and like this is such a little nitpicky thing to me, but like it's one of the things that I always loved about Ripley's character in Alien and Aliens is like she's never sexualized in any way. Like she's never there to like have a love interest and have this story arc where like she's having and like that's like right from the get-go, the first chance we see her, she's sexualized. And that's like feels like very like weird and different and not cool. It feels like a weird way to kind of treat her character that has been introduced in the first two films as like such a strong, independent, self-actualized person that like don't need no man, and like nothing about her says that she relies on anyone other than herself. And so it felt very strange to see Ripley with an actual love interest to me. Again, maybe that's just me being nitpicky about the treatment of female characters in a film, and how I feel like a lot of times certain production companies will feel like you need to have a love interest if there's a female character in a film, because otherwise what is she doing there, which I think is a gross mistreatment and misunderstanding of what that female character is capable of. um
Right, and
so
that's something that's it's very well avoided in Aliens, where
absolutely,
it's alluded to a little bit
it's like a
that
mutual
Hicks
respect with
is
her and Hicks, though. Like
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
mutual
and
respect, you
you
know.
get the sense that there is some sort of attraction there, but it feels more natural. Like it's not like you mentioned, it's not an objectification of her. It's really
Hmm.
just it's too. I mean, not to get in a big aliens debate, but it is over the course of that movie, she is deemed to be the expert on the xenomorph, right?
Yeah,
And so I see where you're coming from in that. I
it
still
feels
feel like she's the
shoehorned. It feels
I,
shoehorned is my thing.
so, and you're talking about with that her relationship with Mr. Clements, right?
Yeah.
So okay, so I have a different opinion on that because I feel um like I'm not disagreeing with you. I just feel like I think that relationship's fairly well done with how they explain the xenomorph being there and what she's trying to hide. And she knows that it's a company prison installation. That she knows that she can't trust them. Um, and she knows that if the company finds out there's just something there, that they'll come and get it. And so I kind of feel like I do kind of like I like a lot of their scenes together. Like I do feel they're sort of kept on the same level, and I feel like they're both hiding something, but they're both at they're at the end of space and just almost like left to die. So I don't know. I think it's like I think it's one of those things that they were probably like, let's inject some humanity into this sort of dour situation, but I just like I mean, I like Charles Dance as an actor, right? So
Yeah,
I
he's
think that
great.
I think the acting is really, really well, really good in those scenes. And I think it kind of conveys that sort of that same level of mutual respect. Now, having said that, like, it's like, okay, well, if Charles Dance is there, couldn't Hicks be there too? And that's the criticism of the film, right? Is that maybe they would have gone that way anyway if Hicks was still around. Who knows, right?
Yeah, especially if initially the whole plan for Alien 3, I had to intentionally think about it there, with Alien 3 was to have Hicks take over as like the new like Ripley character, take over as the new lead, as the new focus of this, which would make sense if to kind of pass the torch from one character to the next, from Aliens to this one. But then that they scrapped that, went back with Ripley, because again, I do understand the argument that she is as much of a part of the franchise as a xenomorph is, at least in this period. Now we've
Oh,
kind of had
100%.
enough, now
100%.
we've had enough spin-offs and et cetera that like, but even still with the spin-offs and everything else, it doesn't really feel like an alien movie at the same time, because you're like, where's Ripley? I feel like she's got to be here somewhere. um but I think the other kind of cool thing about this film though is that stylistically and aesthetically and tonally, like it really marries itself to its theme. Like it looks excellent for how bad it looks, if that makes sense. Like it doesn't look warm and welcoming, and but it also doesn't look like the same kind of methodical metallicism that you see in Aliens. It's like very earthy but drab and terrible at the
And
same time. It's just
those are Fincher's, like, that's Fincher's color palette too. I
for
mean, like, you get,
sure.
like, the greens, browns,
Oh
like,
yeah.
oranges, like, and sort of dialed right back, so it does feel sort of, like, organic, but also, like,
Not quite, like, out of this
not
world in a
alive.
way,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and, like, it does feel like a stupid, crummy space jail, and I think that the music is another big part of that, and I know that, particularly for the score, which was, done by, Elliot Goldenthal, so he spent a year composing the score by working closely with David Fincher to create music kind of based on the surrounding and the atmosphere of the film. But the score was recorded during the 1992 LA riots, which kind of, as the composer said, contributed to the film's the score's disturbing nature, because you had like all this chaos and turmoil going on pretty much right outside the studio. Like I know that Fincher made comments about like the fact that there was the lab where the film's negatives were being developed and stored was like where the LA riots were very, very close to. And he admitted saying that, like, I was really hoping that they'd catch on fire and this film would have been destroyed and then the film would be done with and that would be it. So, like, that's kind of what he was saying, like, because he knew that the constant interference strayed so far from his vision that the only way to do a director's cut would be to like just destroy the negatives and start from scratch. So I
And
think that having that kind of like turbulent background really leans in and adds to the atmosphere of this film.
yeah, and I just, now, I think this movie has aged better than people think it has.
I would agree.
And I would definitely say to people, I mean, I'd love for them to go back and sort of retouch up some of the special effects, like some of the planet scenes. They've done that before in episodes of like Star Trek and that sort of thing. I mean, it'd be great for them to kind of go in and touch this film up, because again, probably not high on the priority list at all. But if David Fincher was to ever come back and maybe do something with it, it'd be great to see if they could do that, because all of the practical effects in this movie are awesome. Like they
Mhm.
all look good. It's all the digital effects that don't really stand up. And we were kind of at that time in 92 where it's like, Terminator 2 had come out and everyone was like, and, Jurassic Park was on its way and everyone was like, we can do anything we want. And it's like, some of that stuff's aged terribly, but there are some great scenes of the xenomorph up front. That the scenes where it's coming into sort of the hallways, the blood scene, which is great, where it's covered in blood. Like, I just feel like there's a lot of good stuff happening in this film, and there's a good film in there. It just wasn't allowed to kind of breathe. So I do feel the film gets a bit of a bad rap. It's a very dour movie, and we talked to people like after we did our podcast in Sudbury. We actually had dinner with a few of the folks up there, of course, including Chris Alexander from Delirium, and of course, I used to work for Fangoria. But yeah, he was saying, yeah, I remember seeing that movie, and it was just, oh god, it was just awful. And Bill from Rue Morgue was saying the same thing. He's like, oh man, he's like, remember leaving the theater just like so bummed out, like just so just withered down from this sort of dour movie that didn't have any ups in it. And
Yeah.
I appreciate that for sure. I can imagine. And I probably have a different perspective on it from when I saw it myself, but I do feel like there's lots of good little misdirections in this movie. I think that there's something good happening. I just think it is a dour film, but I kind of dig that, to be honest. I feel like that was always that's kind of how the future is painted, and even in Alien
Yeah.
1, is that there's no real hope left at the end of the galaxy. Everyone's just mining planets and whatever. So I
Yeah.
do feel it plays well. And my hot take is that I think that maybe I should save this. Maybe I should save this. You want me to say it now? I'll say it now.
Say it now. You've already introduced it.
Okay. I know originally at the start of the program, I said that this movie was, always the worst of the trilogy, but now I kind of think it's the third best Alien film. That's my hot take.
Really? That
I think it's
is
better
a
than
hot
Romulus.
take.
I think it's better than I think it's better than Prometheus. It's better than Covenant for sure. And
Mhm.
I think it's better than Resurrection. Like, I don't think there's another movie. I think Romulus comes close, but this
Yeah.
movie's more original. Like, this movie is more original for what they were trying to do. Whether or not it worked or not, I'm not sure. I think it kind of does. But that's my hot take.
It is more Ripley too. I think that when it comes to Alien 3 or Cubed, I really do think that if this film had come out more recently, like I feel like it does age well because I feel like as an audience, we're more willing to accept that dour ending, that kind of like nihilistic feeling to a film. I feel like we've kind of grown as a group of jaded people and jaded moviegoers to appreciate that type of
What?
ending
What
in
are
a
you
film.
talking about? What are you
We're
jaded
all
movie
so
girl?
jaded. I not just like moviegoers in general, but just like jaded as like
No, I know. I'm just
people that
joking.
are going through a lot of weird shit over the last couple of years. So I feel like this film also speaking of like Terminator 2, which you mentioned, uh the film had originally ended or scripted ending with Ripley dying by dropping herself into the hot molten lead, but when they learned that this is extraordinarily similar to how Terminator 2 Judgment Day was going to end in 1991, they decided that like the chest burster had to come out of Ripley in the final moment. David Fincher was like against this addition, but when he was kind of like forced, like, nope, this is what we're doing, he's like, all right, we're going to make it as cathartic as possible. She's got to be like at peace, having this sigh of relief, and just like having this moment of like at peace with herself and the world and the fact that she's destroying this creature, and finally like ending this chapter of this terrible long chapter of her life that she's ending this way. But the new ending was shot 4 days before the movie opened.
Yeah, that's
So
crazy. Like that's
yeah.
insane. Even by today's standards with
Yeah.
digital and all that stuff, that's a crazy that's an insane thing to do. I think it, I mean, I think I don't know. So let's just like nice segue, Kels. Let's jump
Yeah,
into like our favorite scenes and
for
maybe
sure.
some quotes here and stuff too as we wrap things up here. But
Let's do
like
it.
do you have any like you have a different take on this movie than I do, but are
Yeah.
there any scenes that kind of pop out to you that you think are, and we'll throw up some of the
Some
stills
stills.
in the movie as well
Yeah,
that you think
so I
are
think one of my favorite scenes is actually we have a still of it. So at one point, David Fincher was denied permission by the film's producers to shoot this critical, crucial, monumental, important film scene in the infirmary between Ripley and the alien, where the alien like kind of closes in on Ripley, and there it is. There's the moment that he kind of menacingly closes in on Ripley, and has that moment of like that interaction of recognizing that there's something special about her. But against orders, Fincher grabbed Sigourney Weaver and a camera and like just shot the scene anyways, because he's like, I want to do this, I gotta do this, it's gonna work. And the scene not only appears in the final cut, but is also predominantly in the trailers, and like it's one of the most iconic shots of the film. Like I remember
yeah, this is the one
seeing
right here. This is
this
the
particular
final, yeah.
shot. Yeah, this particular shot, I remember seeing this above all else when I was like a young kid and not allowed to watch it. I remember seeing this particular shot and being like, "Oh, maybe I know why I'm not allowed to watch it. Maybe something bad happens to her." And I assumed it would be that like something bad would happen with the xenomorph, but I mean, I guess essentially it kind of does, but in a different way. So that's a big scene for me that I really enjoy. I feel like it is a great way to bring that next step out for Ripley as a character, this next stage for her.
And I think
Because
this is
really,
very
like,
pivotal. This is very pivotal to the plot too,
absolutely.
because at the start of the film, you feel like, I mean, there are some major changes too, right? Like, so there is different. One of the main differences between the assembly cut and the theatrical cut is that in the theatrical cut, there is the dog gets attacked by the face hugger, and
Dislike.
that's where the alien comes from, is from a dog, which doesn't make a lot of sense just because of like the size of the dog and the size of the alien that emerges. So it's
Yeah,
a little bit, but in the
I have a
original,
funny thing about that too.
in the original assembly cut, it was an ox, and we'll throw a still up here too as well of this ox. Now this isn't a real ox. It's fake. It's special effects, right? But this was the ox that was used in the assembly cut, and in the assembly cut, when they go and grab the ship, the shuttle that's crashed into the ocean, they actually they pull it out using these oxen that are on the planet. It's like the only animal they have other than and I don't even think the dog's in the assembly cut. I can't remember, but
I don't
and
think
the
he
alien
is.
bursts through the ox, and it's the same thing. It's the same like the funeral scene is the same. You see the bodies drop over. You see, they make the speeches and that sort of stuff, and then the alien kind of bursts through the ox. It's a way better scene, and it also kind of alludes to the fact that like this alien is bigger and badder because it came from a larger animal, and
Mhm.
I just feel it's like it's a cool thing to do. And but again, not thinking that there's only one alien and it's going to hunt it down. It's like this scene, obviously the iconic face off scene with the xenomorph and Ripley. Um, Alluding to the fact that she does actually carry an alien inside of her, and of course it's a queen, which is an interesting thing that the alien can tell that. I think that's a really cool thing that's kind of put into alien lore, and I think that's probably Fincher's doing, right? So
Yeah. One thing about the dog is, they had initially, like, I guess someone who worked on the effects of the film or somehow they got their hands on a whippet, which is a breed of dog, not necessarily terribly unsafe recreational activity. But it is a breed of dog, the Whippet, and it's like it looks almost like a greyhound, but like a smaller version of a greyhound almost. And so I think you can look online. They probably have a video of it of like this
yeah, it's
poor
hilarious.
Whippet decked
It's
out
really
in
funny.
this xenomorph outfit, and it's just like trotting around. It looks so doofy. Like it's just such an awkwardly running around animal. They're like, we can't use this. We got to cut this out,
And
guys.
it's
And
interesting too that they went
yeah.
there because they like I think personally the one thing that sort of like kind of saves this movie is the fact that like the xenomorph is sort of explained to be this is a prison with all of these
Mhm.
murderers and like killers and rapists and like just awful scum of the earth, like
The
people left
worst.
at the end of the galaxy to die, to rot and die, basically, and that the xenomorph is more evil than them and
Yeah.
more like and I think that's that's such a cool thing. Like I always will stand by this. The xenomorph is the greatest villain, the greatest creature, the greatest monster in all of cinematic history. I think it is the best and it's the most scary. And it's like, I don't know. I just feel like when they do the dog, I mean, I guess a lot of people don't like, like, again, it's like nobody wants to see a dog in peril. I guess nobody
Mhm.
really cares about the ox, but the ox scene, the birthing scene with the xenomorph, like the chest busting scene in that it does feel bigger. Like it feels like it's
Mhm.
like scarier, right? So I don't know.
Well, I remember seeing the scene with the Roddy in this one, and, like, I, to be frank, didn't really know what was going on for a chunk of it. Like, it's not very clearly telegraphed or communicated what exactly is happening. Like, you kinda, like, put 2 and 2 together, but I think that it's such a strange thing having it contrasted with that eulogy for Newt and Hicks with having this like birthing scene from the dog. It felt like a really weird kind of dichotomy between the two, and like it didn't feel like it gelled very well for me. But maybe that's just me. But I just felt that whole scene like I think that the eulogy on its own is like such an important piece of dialogue, and I think you've got a quote from it as part of your favorite quotes.
Yeah. I mean,
But
I think like the
it
dog
just
being in
didn't work
the
for me.
yeah, like the dog being at the start of the theatrical cut where the dog's
Yeah.
barking into the crash. He's looking into the crash smashed shuttle, and he's barking because obviously there's a xenomorph in there or a face hugger. And then
Right.
the guy goes, oh, yeah, he sees that the face hugger is like sort of like ripped like some of the flesh away from the dog's head and stuff. Like I feel like it's like but you never really see that before in an alien film. Like the face hugger really just goes on and that's it. With
Yeah.
the ox stuff in the assembly cut, it's sort of like you're like the guy picks up this dead face hugger at the end of that scene. He goes, and he's just like, "What's this?" You know what I mean? Like, and everyone goes, "Oh shit, it's a face hugger, right?" So, but it doesn't really explain how it face hugged an ox, but you never see that, so
Yeah.
you can kind of let it go.
Let it slide.
But yeah, I mean, I think that the idea of I think also this film is the film that sort of gave the idea of like, well, what if we crossed all this DNA? Like, what if it what if the DNA is crossed with like a watermelon or like, a cob of corn? Like, what kind of alien do we get there? And I think that that's
A
sort of
very
almost like
ineffective one.
something that might have influenced like Prometheus down the road. I don't know,
Mhm.
but like I feel like it was the one time that they were like, let's try and make something a little bit different. So I mean, the other big change between the two cuts is that is I think it's Gallic who he sees the alien and he gets put in the infirmary because he's losing his mind. But he actually has some sort of like kind of religious sort of connection to the creature. He calls it the dragon. And he
Mhm.
actually, there's all these kinds of little tiny scenes that are sort of cut from the theatrical cut that like they capture the alien at one point and he releases it again because he believes that that's his calling, and he has some sort of connection to this sort of demon, which is really interesting. It's a really interesting subplot that doesn't get room to breathe in the theatrical cut at all.
Mhm.
And I think it kind of plays into the idea that they were trying something new, or at least trying their very best to get something new on film. And I think there's some great callbacks in this movie too, with Ripley running down the hallway towards the mess hall. I think that's a callback to Alien One, which I think is really really nice. Obviously, one of the taglines that you had for the marketing piece that you did earlier, I think plays right into that. And when Pete Postlewaite, Kobayashi, that's the guy's name. Remember, we couldn't remember that live. Kobayashi is the lawyer, is
Ah,
Kaiser Soze's lawyer
there you
from The
go.
Usual
Okay.
Suspects. So Kobayashi,
Pete Postlethwaite.
yeah, so he says hey kitty 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 when he's trying to get the alien to come out, which is a callback to Alien One as well. So I mean, I don't know, I think that them being on this prison, they don't have any weapons, like they have to kind of like work together
Make
to try
do.
and make do, and you don't trust anybody because they're all scum, and there's only a couple of
Terrible.
guys that like, the warden is not great. Mr. Clemens is sort of like the only guy that's sort of like half redeemable, but again, uh, like like uh like in the other cut of the film, like the longer cut of the film, like you do see some more personality of the prisoners and how they interact and their relationships with one another. So it does
Mhm.
mean like obviously they're obviously just fodder for the alien, but there
Right.
is something there. And they're more distinguishable, I think, in the assembly cut as opposed to what you get in the theatrical.
I think that that's one of the things I do really appreciate about the setting of the stupid crummy space jail is the fact that there is no weaponry. Like they're really kind of on their own with this. And I think that that's a really great way to approach a horror film and B a film with like an alien as deadly as a xenomorph because like really they are screwed here. Like they are just kind of just really trying to make do with what they've got and what they have is not a lot. So it's not surprising that this Alien is as devastatingly effective as it is, and that they kind of get completely destroyed in the way that they do, and that it ends in the way that it does, which is a very bleak ending, but also kind of I feel like the only way this film could end. There's no way this movie could end in like a big triumphant, like we conquered it, we won, hooray, hooray, hooray. Like it kind of has to end on this really dour is the word, this really dour kind of nihilistic note. I think is the best way to end this film.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, and if you have quotes, we should move on to those next.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do that because I think this plays really nicely into this. I
Mhm,
do feel too when I watch the movie now that the that sort of level of dourness in the film, and that downturn, that bummer kind of note like that this
yeah,
film holds is very much like, it doesn't, like, society is not coming back from this. Like, this is the only
yeah,
way. This society sucks. It's like the company controls everything. It's commercialized. It's everything is done for the money or the weaponry.
mhm.
And it's never doesn't beat you over the head, but you gotta, I look at this now and I go, yeah, okay, yeah. Like if this movie was made today, I'd be like, man, like, I'm like, yeah,
They're
I think
onto something.
they're onto something. But yeah, let's move on to some quotes. Do you want to go
Yeah.
first? Or what do you want me to
Sure,
go first
yeah,
or what?
yeah. You can go first if you'd like to.
Okay, so my favorite quotes. Now this is obviously from the theatrical cut, which you just mentioned.
Mhm,
But when the one prisoner, I can't remember his name, but he sees the dog that has all the kind of the scars from from the face hugger, and he says, "What kind of animal would do this to a dog?" Which I think is great because it's just like, of course, nobody, not even the prisoners, like he can't even figure
Yeah.
it out. He's like, all these crazy murderers wouldn't do this to a
Who would
dog,
do
but like
such a thing?
the xenomorph doesn't care. It's soulless killing machine, like awesome.
Mhm.
I love the scene when Ripley goes to meet Charles S. Dutton, who is amazing in this film. He really is kind of him
Oh,
and
he's
Charles
so
Dance
good.
are sort of like the glue that kind of holds this together. And
Definitely.
if those two weren't in the movie, I don't really know what Fincher would do because Sigourney Weaver can only do so much. But
Oh,
when she goes into the or so the mess hall, and obviously she's the only woman on the planet, or in the prison. And Charles S. Dutton says, "You don't want to know me, lady. I'm a rapist and murderer of women." And then she just looks at him and she goes, "Really? Well, I guess I must make you nervous," which I think is a great line and a great moment for that character. And she just
yeah.
sits down, starts eating with him, like, and which
Like,
kind of reminds
"What?"
me of that line, that scene from True Romance where like Drexel's just like, "You just sat yourself down, like, grab yourself an egg roll." Like, I just feel like she's like, it's such a
Yeah.
boss move, right? Like, she doesn't have fear of that. I do like just tying this together again. Charles S. Dutton is a lot of my quotes, but when she's getting attacked by the other prisoners and accosted, Charles S. Dutton saves her. And then
Mhm.
he looks at her and says, "Take off. I got to re-educate some of the brothers. We got to discuss some matters of the spirit." And then he's just going to beat him up, right? Like I think that's a great scene too,
Yeah.
for their misdeeds, for their misbehavior, right?
Yeah.
And the last one again is Charles S. Dutton again, when he says, he's like, "You want to die on your feet or die on your knees? Begging. I ain't much for begging." I think that's
I like that.
a great friggin' line. So
That
what do
is.
you got?
Mine are all from Ripley, believe it or not. So the first one in regards to the lack of weaponry. Do we have the capacity to make fire? Most humans have enjoyed that privilege since the Stone Age, which is appropriately sassy, I think, from her.
Absolutely.
Secondly, when talking about like the company coming to help them, what makes you think they're going to care about you lifers who found God at the ass end of space? Which I think is also a great line because it also kind of emphasizes the hopelessness of their situation and that like really nobody's here to help them. Nobody's going to come out and save these guys. And then her line to the xenomorph, "You've been in my life so long, I can't remember anything else," which is such a wonderfully
Yeah.
tragic line for her character. Because really, like, it has been so long for Ripley with this character, with this character of the xenomorph, that this is all she knows at this point. This is her beginning and her end of her and her arc. And I think it's a really beautiful and very tragic line of dialogue.
I haven't really done the math on that, but it's almost 100 years, I think. I
Hmm.
think it's almost 100 years that she's been, because it's 57 in Aliens, 20 years. She's probably what, 20, supposed to be 25 maybe in Alien 1. So it's
Right.
close, right? It's close.
And then she had that daughter that they have in the director's cut of Aliens that they kind of don't have at all in the theatrical release, which is unfortunate that she had a daughter that she left behind when she went on the Nostromo. And then that daughter's gone through an entire lifespan, lived and died while
Yeah.
Ripley was lost in space, which is very sad.
Yeah. And there's a mess.
Mhm.
There's a line in Alien 3 too, where one of the prisoners says to her, "Yeah, you could settle down, start a family." And
Mhm.
she just looks at him, and I think that's supposed to be like a bit of a callback too. That she's given up on that. Like she knows
Yeah.
that that's not that's not something she can ever obtain, which is sad too, right? But still, it's
Yeah.
like, I don't know, something about that makes me like, I just feel like it's awesome somehow, right? Like she's this warrior, and she's the only foil that can that can accurately depict how terrifying the xenomorph is, and she's the only one that can fight it.
She's the only one that understands, and I think, like, for Ripley, one of the things I love about this character is that for 2 whole movies, she's banging her head against a wall being like, "Why don't you understand how bad this is?" Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
this is her cross to bear of, like, being the only one that truly knows the danger and the severity of the situation, and everyone else is like, "Ah, it's fine, we got these guns," or like, "Ah, it's fine, we're prisoners, this is nothing scares us." But it's like, "No, no, 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 no." She knows what she's talking about, so you should probably listen to Ripley. And I kind of love and hate that for her that she's forever being gaslit by people that don't think she knows what she's talking about.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think too, like how they, I mean, again, I think they've struggled to make other alien movies that have any sort of impact without Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah.
You could make the case for Alien Resurrection, but she's not really the same character, right? Like she's a
Mhm.
different version, and she's acting differently, and that's fine. I think it was kind of a little bit of an ingenious way to bring back that character,
Sure.
but in this film, it is her. I think she's very astute, and she's very knowledgeable, obviously, of the alien and the xenomorph, but she's also very um, like when she's checking for infection and stuff like that in the film, like she's very meticulous, and she's
Very
very
thorough.
very thorough and very aware of the threat, and how conveying information to the other people could be an expansion of that threat as opposed to a limiter of it. So
Mm,
I don't know. I think it's
yeah.
cool stuff. Anyway, I like this movie a
Closing
lot, man. I like this movie every time
most
I go
people.
back to it, I think it's a better film. Like, so anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And what are your closing thoughts then? Is that a good segue for this?
Sure, sure. Yeah, coming
Mhm.
up on the hour mark. Again, big thanks to Casey Ferguson at the Casey Ferguson Show for having us be part of this program and this. What am I looking for? See, I'm thinking about two different things at the same time.
I keep
Uh,
thinking Halloween in May again, but
we
it's
were
just proper
yeah,
Halloween. S
Scarorama, right? So Scarathon,
Scarima.
Scarathon.
Scarathon, there we go.
Scareathon. Big thanks for having us out again. And of course, thank you for everyone tuning in on YouTube and on any other platform. Please subscribe, follow us on Instagram. Our handle is at Black Fawn Distro, and you can check out our channel on YouTube as well. But my closing thoughts on the film:
Mhm.
I think this movie is criminally underrated. I think it has a lot of good things going for it. And I really, really hope that Fincher goes back at some point and has some budget to do some stuff. Like, I look at this film in very, very similar to other projects that have maybe floundered so badly from mismanagement from past studios and past studio heads. I'd love to see him get like 20 million bucks, right? Free of charge, to say, do you want to actually fix this? And maybe have Sigourney Weaver's input into it as well, and seeing if you can really craft something, redo some of the special effects, and make something that is really like kind of like a fitting end to at least this original trilogy. I don't think we'll ever get that, but a boy can dream, I guess. But I think it's got some interesting performances, and I also think that it's that the sets and the music and all that stuff, there is a good movie just waiting to chest bust out of whatever the studio wanted to give us in the first place. How about you?
Excellent. I feel like David Fincher reapproaching this film as like someone going back to an abusive ex, or like they may have like imagined
Yeah,
something different from this relationship, but like it was everything they wanted from the relationship. It was not that at all. And there's probably nothing that's salvageable from the wreckage left over. Like, I don't know, unless they went back and reshot half the movie. And I don't know if Sigourney Weaver or any other cast members would be up for that at this point in their careers.
no.
I don't know that they'd be able to have it go back and do the vision that he wanted from this film, which I think is a tragedy, because I would have loved to see his original vision without all the studio interference. I think that this film
You could watch the
absolutely
assembly cut, and you'd have a little
it's
bit more of a window.
but it's still not the same, because he
I
would
know,
still
I know.
had so much studio interference. Like I heard a story where there was a writer that he was working with, I think it was Rex Pickett, that basically like whenever David Fincher had to call him about the script, he would like they would have a code where he would call him, let it ring twice, then hang up, and then call again, so that Rex Pickett would know that it was David Fincher calling, so he'd actually pick up the phone and not like be like, oh god, it's them calling me again. Because that was just, again, such an abusive ex situation with this film. So I would have loved to see it as his original intent was, but I think that uh, I really think that this film has aged better than expected. And I feel like this is a film that if it was released today, audiences would be more receptive of than they were in 1992.
Interesting. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, listen, that about does it. That's our coverage, our 90s night on Alien 3, probably the most divisive Alien film in the entire franchise, of course, released in 1992. But if you have a second, go and check out the assembly cut. It is well worth your time if you're an Alien fan, especially if you had problems with Alien Romulus like I kind of did. But anyway, I digress. Again,
Another
big
conversation.
another conversation for another episode of 90s Night. We're coming up right on the hour mark. I got 30 seconds to get out of here. Big thanks to Casey Ferguson again for having us as part of Scarathon. And of course, check us out online. And we'll be back with another 90s Night. Of course, we've got something coming up. I think we're going to do 7 next.
Yeah.
We'll see. But until next time, I'm Benner. This is Kells, and we'll see you next time on 90s Night.
Bye.